Tuesday, everybody. It's Tuesday. That means GTD, Game Time Decision. We're back at it. We're on spring break right now, so we're coming virtually. Our first little virtual setup. I'm excited. I actually just hung this stuff up like, I don't know, 10 minutes ago, right after the Las Vegas race we just watched, which came down to the wire, kind of, not really. We'll dive into that a little later, but it was really fun to watch. But we had a lot more racing than just Las Vegas. We had F1 Saturday, NASCAR today. I mean, I'm as excited as you can be. How about you, Micah?
Yeah, it was a great weekend. Great to have F1 and NASCAR back on the same weekend. And I like these Saturday F1 races to where I'm able to still just
Yeah.
have Sunday morning to go to church, do that. Then I can come back and watch NASCAR, have F1 on Saturday, and just have a nice full weekend of racing. So super excited about that. And even though the F1 race was a bit dull, we still got another very good NASCAR race this week, which I was pretty excited about.
And for the viewers out there that don't know this, Micah took the advantage of a 9 a.m. Saturday F1 race and decided to sleep through it and have to watch it
I
later.
did do that.
So we don't get many of those. So hopefully he doesn't sleep through the next one. The next one is Saturday morning too, a little later. I think it's 11
Yeah,
a.m.
we get it
Central
at
Time.
noon.
So
11 a.m.
okay,
Central,
yeah,
noon over here on the Eastern Time Zone as I'm back in South Carolina today.
yeah. So just a lot more racing to be excited about. But let's just go ahead and get right to it. We'll start with NASCAR. It's fresh in our brains. We just watched the Las Vegas race. Good crowd for Las Vegas race. I feel like the last few
Yeah,
races there have been pretty good, especially last fall with Larson winning. He won again today, but I mean, good crowds.
for sure. And that's really
Um,
encouraging to see, especially off the back of the three wide of the line at Atlanta. I think you're going to see that for a lot more races this year, especially if these type of finishes continue or you're getting consistent close racing at the end. That'll definitely draw more crowds. So super excited to see NASCAR growing. I know NASCAR's been all over Twitter this past week. A lot of prominent people on
oh,
Twitter
yeah,
checking out NASCAR. So great to see for the sport.
yeah, and I mean it's they even said on the broadcast that Atlanta tickets have just skyrocketed for the race they have at the end of summer, beginning of fall. So you may even see us back there. You know, that's how exciting it was. So we'll see when we get closer. But I know tickets for Atlanta are going to sell. Probably more super speedway tickets like your Talladega, your summer Daytona race. I mean, those tickets are going to sell. They always do. But I think the slightly almost sold out crowd you've seen at Talladega and those races recently will just skyrocket to sold out, packed grandstands. And I, for one, am very excited for NASCAR. Fans is something they've desperately needed, and they've been doing a great job this offseason and with the races we've had this year to ensure that with the Netflix special and just the few great races we've had so far. So I'm ecstatic, and I think the momentum that NASCAR is on right now is going to hopefully keep skyrocketing.
Yes, definitely. But as far as the actual racing, obviously Kyle Larson took the win in this one just as you predicted coming in, and he really
Yep.
ran the
We got our
show the
first
entire race, was practically untouchable.
Yeah, we got our first prediction only at rate into race three, so that's still pretty early. It's pretty good. I do claim this. I'm 1-2 on the season. Micah's 0-3. Who did you have again for this race?
I had Ryan Blaney, who ended up third, so
That's
still
right.
not bad for me. I
Yep.
continue
He
my
he had a
trend of
fast car.
picking very
Yeah.
fast cars that don't win the race.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that trend continues, and I'll just keep picking the ones who hopefully do win the race. But yeah. I mean, we talked about it last week. We thought Hendrick was probably going to win this race. They probably had the better shot with Byron and Larson out of the two, and they got it done. And I think Byron probably had a chance, could have won the race, but a very weird scenario, Las Vegas, especially after Chris Buescher's tire implodes, then explodes, and the lug nut shoots
Yeah,
off, and the rim just flies out. I mean, it was just weird. And then you had Byron who sucked up a trash bag in the middle of the race, like a whole trash bag, engine shot to 350 degrees. Just very, very unlucky and unfortunate for him because he had a really fast car, and I think he could have been in there with Reddick and Larson at the end.
yeah, for sure. You hate to see that for him. And then still finished ahead of Alex Bowman, though, who continues to kind of do nothing. Got beaten by Carson Hocevar in this race. And we talked about him at the start of the season. At what point does he just get booted out of Hendrick? Because this is starting to just be completely inexcusable.
So it's a great time to talk about this because today or this race marks his 2 year anniversary of his last win. So it has officially been 2 years since Alex Bowman's last win, and I'm with you. I'm not sure, kind of if Hendrick's shopping around looking for someone, or if they're just going to keep riding out with him because he had the injury last year and he never really was the same when he got back from the injury, and so they're going to kind of give him some, I guess, room to grow or whatever. But I feel like you got to start looking at, kind of like we talked about the Austin Dillons, the Daniel Suarez coming into the season, kind of start kind of look at, okay, maybe Bowman's not what we thought he would be, so kind of start looking at our options. But apart from Bowman, I mean, Elliott, he gets hurt last year, then suspended from a race, and we really haven't seen, honestly, we haven't seen him compete in a race to a win since. So,
No.
I mean, they have two kind of cars. And Elliott Chase Elliott, I mean, he's giving you wins. He's giving you a championship. He gets you sponsors. I mean, you're not going to get rid of Chase Elliott. But, I mean, you just
No.
got to think, like, what's going on with Chase Elliott,
Yeah, he was kind of near that, just outside the top 10 or the back of the top 10 pretty much all day today, kind of an anonymous race for him. And I think he's a bit lucky that Byron had the problems he did, or else you could have had two Hendrick cars in the top 3 or 4 while Elliott sits in 12th and Bowman's down near 20th. So not a great look for either
Yeah.
of them, but definitely I think Bowman is more in trouble because of that sponsorship. Like you said, he is just not nearly as marketable as Chase Elliott, so I think he's very much in danger right now.
No, I agree. But we did see some guys who, we talked about Austin Dillon. He had a good showing today. Ended up finishing 16th, but in the third stage, I mean, the first half of the race he was kind of just hanging back, whatever. And you saw Kyle Busch kind of competing for the lead. So you're like, oh well. I mean, Busch is showing you what you can do in an RCR car. But then Austin Dillon had a pretty fast car in stage three. Kind of ran up to the top five for a little bit, hung out. I mean, he showed some good things today, which is good to see from Austin Dillon.
Yeah, he was at one point ahead of Kyle Busch on pure pace. Kyle Busch caught to the back of him, and we were both like, oh, he's going by for sure. And then Dillon held him off. Credit to him. Of course, Kyle
Yeah.
Busch then with that late second penalty going back to the rear again, and then Dillon fading towards the end. Kind of a what could have been race for RCR in this one. But yeah, credit to him for running well how he did. And then a good race from Ty Gibbs as well, picking up a top 5 and looks like the fastest Joe Gibbs car at the end of this race, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he had that issue with his gearbox, didn't have turn or gear one, so just kind of had to make do with what he got. But I mean, he did it once. I mean, obviously that doesn't matter once you're on the track. You're not really using gear one a lot, but yeah, I mean, he was a plow there at the end, and I mean, he showed some speed, and the Toyota showed a lot. This is the first kind of normal race that NASCAR has had this season, especially with the new Toyota body and the new Ford body. And I say out of the two new bodies, Toyota's looked just a step ahead of Ford. Yeah, Blaney was fast. Cindric was fast for a little bit, but the Fords and all just kind of looked slower compared to the Toyotas. And Toyota really showed up. Chevy's been good. I mean, all season they've won all 3 races, and most of their Xfinity and truck races have been won by Chevy. So Chevy still looks dominant, but they didn't change anything. Toyota, out of the two new changes, I think Toyota is kind of the guys who stepped up and are a little better of the two new bodies.
Yeah, for sure. You saw Toyota once again pretty slow in qualifying, other than Bubba Wallace, but they have this race pace thing figured out. I feel like every race this season, the Toyotas have not qualified well at all. Then as the race goes on, they just move forward up the pack. So they were talking about their downforce coefficients and their downforce numbers, what they think those are going to be, if those are going to match up. And it looks like the way those cars are handling, they're set up really well. Whereas the Fords, as they maybe have more of that one lap outright speed, you look to them in the race, and like you said, a lot of them were just falling like rocks down to the back of the pack. Although one guy that wasn't was Noah Gragson, who ended up 6th today in a Stewart-Haas car where his teammates all finished 20th or worse. So I think this was an outstanding performance for Noah Gragson today. I know you were talking about in our first episode, him maybe being their new Kevin Harvick and being that guy that can outperform that equipment. And I think he's already showing that with this kind of run today at his home track as well.
Yeah, I mean, Stuart Haas kind of been nowhere to be seen recently, but Gregson comes out, gets him a top 10 today, comes in 6th. Big morale booster for that team. But there's a lot of talks kind of in the background of NASCAR that Stuart Haas may not be with Ford next year. Their deal's up at the end of the year. They may downsize. There's talks of going to three charters or two charters and selling a charter, which we haven't seen in NASCAR in a while. But I mean, if they're not with Ford, because Ford did kind of boot them for front row motorsports. So I mean, we could see Stuart Haas with Toyota or Chevy next season, or maybe not next season, but 2026, 2027, if the Honda talks kind of ever
Yeah,
finalized, we could see him with Honda kind of being the Honda's team. But that'll be further down the line if that happens. But talks have seemed to kind of intensify with Honda to NASCAR. We'll get more into that the closer we get to learning more about that. But yeah, I mean Larson, I mean masterclass today. One stage one,
for
one
sure.
stage two, won the race. There at the end, I mean, every time there was a big green flag run, he just pulled away, and it wasn't there till the end till someone caught him, and that was Tyler Reddick. And then it was kind of just like toying with Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick saying like, "Oh, come get me," then I drive right back off. "Oh, come get me," then I drive right back off. And it wasn't really till the last 5-6 laps where Tyler Reddick really had a shot, and then Larson just did Larson things and took some air off his nose and ran away with the victory. So just impressive to see Kyle
Yeah,
Larson.
well,
What's your take?
I think you'll see the hat. Obviously, a Tyler Reddick fan myself, but despite that, I do think Tyler Reddick had the best car in this race on very long runs because every time you got towards the end of a stage and then towards the end of a race, that's when he would start to catch back up to Larson. I think Larson's car was far and away the best on those short and medium runs, but when you got very deep into a green flag run, Reddick would start to close up, and then towards the end of the race, he started doing that as well, but just masterful driving from Larson there at the end with 2 laps to go and 3 and 4 just came down, took all the air right off the nose of Reddick's car, and that was it. He didn't have anything left for him. So a great race from Kyle Larson. Obviously, a Reddick fan, I'm a bit disappointed with it, but still a great race from him. And just you got to give credit to Kyle Larson. He is, I think, one of the best drivers in the world, not just NASCAR. He wins
Oh
in
yeah,
everything he drives. So completely outstanding driver.
pretty masterful burnout too by Kyle Larson. I mean that was a long burnout. I guess we were too excited last week. We kind of forgot to rate the burnout just because we just got home from one of the greatest races of all time. So we're bringing that back. We're going to rate the burnout. I'm going to give it a 7. It was a really long burnout and a great burnout, and he burned it for a long time. But I like a little more like Joey Logano had some flair to his long burnouts with the spins and everything, and I like a little bit of flair. So, but still a good solid 7. So, what's your rating?
I'm going to give an 8 to Kyle Larson on this one. I think just the pure smokescreen factor from that long drag down the front stretch was amazing. Then going into that spin towards the pit road entry, just an excellent burnout all around. So an
Yeah.
8 for me.
Yeah. So let's look a week ahead. We have Phoenix coming up next week, the track that ultimately the championship will be decided on at the end of the year. So Phoenix is really an important spring race to kind of get practice in and know who's going to be good at this track and what teams are going to be good. So more traditional style racing here, and I love the restarts when they all just fan out. You can use the whole track. I mean, Phoenix is just a great track to watch. Um, I want to lean Brad Kozlowski just because I like the way he drives and I think he can get it done at Phoenix, but I just haven't seen enough speed from RFK Racing to kind of put my money on Brad. Um, I do think a Toyota is going to win. I'm going to go ahead and say a Toyota will win at Phoenix. That's almost for sure. You can put your money on that. And I was bouncing before Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, maybe Denny Hamlin, but ultimately I think I'm going to go with Bell. He had the trouble last fall there with the tire or the brake issues, but I think Christopher Bell gets it done this weekend.
I agree with you. I think a Toyota definitely wins this race. And I was also thinking Christopher Bell. And then I kind of was thinking about one of these older drivers, Martin Truex, maybe his driving style. But then I decided I got to back my guy. I didn't this week, and he ended up running second with a great car. So I'm backing my guy, Tyler Reddick, for this week. Finished third in the spring race at Phoenix last year. I think he does 2 positions better this time. I think he takes home the win. So I really hope I'm right. It would be great to see him back in victory lane, but these Toyotas, their drivability, I think that definitely gets them over the hump and gets them their first win of the year in Phoenix.
So this is the second week in a row you've taken a revenge pick. Last week you took Blaney after just barely losing, and now you're taking Reddick after a more traditional loss. So I see what you're doing with the revenge picks. So I think hopefully if you keep that up, one will pan out over the year. But the revenge picks are always fun, especially when it's your guy Reddick. Um, Other big news in the world of NASCAR is Dale Earnhardt Jr. is obviously not going to be with NBC. He announced a few months ago that he doesn't have a contract to announce with NBC this year, and he kind of did that just to put himself out there and say, hey, I know what I'm worth, and I'm going to let a company come out and find me. I'm not just going to settle with NBC because it's all we got, because it's not all you have anymore. Starting next year, you have Prime and Warner Brothers or TNT that are airing the whole middle of the season for NASCAR. And so Dale Jr. announced this week via The Athletic that he's not going to be with NBC in the booth at all this year. So no Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the booth this year, but next year he's going to be with Amazon Prime and Warner Brothers or TNT for all their races. So, I mean, these guys are brand new to the sport, and they get the most iconic name in the sport. So big win for them. I'm excited to see what they do and how they build around Dale Earnhardt Jr. and just the guys they bring in with them, and kind of how different they are, because they both have Dale Jr., but are they going to be super different? Are they going to be similar? So I'm excited to watch that. NBC's, it's going to be a little sad not listening to him this year at all with NBC, but yeah, I mean, big swing from Amazon Prime and Warner Brothers, two new partners to the sport.
For sure. You look at these new broadcasting companies coming in, giving competition to stations like Fox, who maybe their camera direction hasn't been great. That's a bit of an understatement, honestly. And then the on-air
Today
talent
was
at
bad.
NBC, I think,
Today
has
was bad.
been yeah, I think has been led by Dale Jr. So to see him move away, I think that's great for Prime, and seeing them pick him up. I think that they're really going to be able to take off quite quickly with Dale Jr. on that crew. I think they'll be able to get a lot of fans to their broadcast crew quickly. And after NASCAR fans being so used to these other two crews, being just the new person on the block for these new broadcast companies, I think will be very beneficial for them.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. But let's hop over to the other kind of side of the other world of racing, the more international world of racing, with F1 finally getting underway. Super exciting. They had the Grand Prix at Bahrain over the weekend. We mentioned at the top of the show. But just give me your take on the racing and how you're feeling about the season.
Congratulations to your 2024 World Drivers Champion, Max Verstappen, is what I have to say.
No kidding.
I think anytime Red Bull delivers a good car, it's so hard to beat Max. He is highly consistent, deadly consistency, honestly. He does not have an off day. It's not like other drivers, like a Lewis Hamilton sometimes will have a slightly off day, or a Sebastian Vettel used to have an off day. Max doesn't have off days. If you watched him all of last season, the only times he didn't win were when he had a grid penalty to start the race, or if Red Bull completely missed, like in Singapore. Anytime Red Bull has delivered him the best car when it shows up to the weekend, and even sometimes when they haven't, Max just has that killer instinct and that consistency to be able to build on it and win just at an alarming rate, honestly. There were a lot of stories coming into the season. Oh, the Ferrari drivability is better. Oh, Mercedes might have found something. Oh, McLaren's going to build on last season. And Max showed up and said, "No, I'm still winning everything," and he did by over 22 seconds. Just highly impressive from Red Bull once again. And then Perez finishing in second. Great start of the year for him after a lot of questions about his form coming into the year. A very good start for him. And then for me, as a Charles Leclerc fan and a Ferrari fan, it's good to see a Ferrari on the podium with Carlos Sainz. I hate that Leclerc is already having car issues this early into the year with the brake issues. I honestly think he could have gotten on that podium spot if he wasn't struggling with the bad brakes for most of that race. But I guess we'll never know. I think that's going to be another great teammate battle. But yeah, Bahrain, I think it kind of filled every F1 fan with dread for the rest of this year with how good Max looks already.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that race was decided in turn one on lap one. Once once Max kind of forced Leclerc wide and just made him had to check up and just kind of pulled away, you kind of got this feeling like this is the race, isn't it? Like it's over now. And Ultimately, it was where there was some good battles though, and I want to touch on Carlos Sainz. I mean, we're in like his Sainz bad boy era. Like he knows he's not gonna be with Ferrari next year.
Yeah,
There's nothing he can do about it. So he's just driving a car. He's not driving a red Ferrari. He's driving a race car to win. He doesn't care about anything. And I think it's going to be, honestly, his best season, maybe. He got the win last year, but I mean, we could see a lot of podiums from Carlos Sainz just because I don't think he cares. He's just racing the hell out of any machine, whoever gives him, to prove to himself that, hey, I'm still a top race car driver in the world, and I'm going to land a spot, and you're going to regret letting me go. Because we saw that with
yeah,
him and Leclerc kind of. Go
yeah.
ahead.
I think he has his eyes set on that other Mercedes seat right now. Their junior Kimi Antonelli, I think, is going to have a great year in F2, but I would not be surprised if Sainz replaces Hamilton. They just do the swap for 1 year, then he moves to Audi or something. But
Right.
he's auditioning for a seat right now, and I definitely think he'll have a seat next year. It's just which one will it be? And he and Leclerc, I think, are two very, very good drivers. Obviously, being a Leclerc fan, I'm going to back my guy and say I think when they're both on, Leclerc is faster, but Sainz is not far off. He's an exceptional driver, and he showed that today. Made some great moves on Russell and on Leclerc at the start of the race. So
Yeah.
props to Sainz.
Yeah.
Definitely deserved the Driver of the Day award that he got, and a good start for Ferrari, although they didn't show up to the podium for him, which is kind of sad, but they did congratulate him after the race at least. But it's a bit weird. He got out of the car and there was no one there.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a very weird, awkward situation, especially if he continues to win and do better than Leclerc. It's gonna be very awkward in the clubhouse. The Ferrari's clubhouse. But yeah, I mean, we could see him kind of just have an unexpected year, perhaps. And but that wasn't the only kind of teammate battle thing we got with Ricardo and Tsunoda. I mean, that was there's it's been race one. We've already had two kind of heated teammate moments. So I mean, that's just wild.
Yeah, if you would have asked me before the season, okay, which two teammates are going to fight at race one, Ricardo and Sonoda would have probably been second last on my list ahead of only Bottas and Joe. So to see them go at it immediately, Sonoda with this almost amateur level hot headedness after a driver swap with him and Ricardo to try to get Ricardo to chase after Magnussen. Then Sonoda got super upset, freaked out on the radio. It was like rookie Yuki Tsunoda was back with him absolutely freaking out. I think he knows there's pressure there that he could be competing with Daniel for that second Red Bull seat. But the dive bomb on the cooldown lap that's amateur hour stuff. It's
Yeah,
inexcusable. If he would have taken out Ricardo after the race, that's a ton of money for RB to have to replace. And now in the cost cap era, a team that's in the midfield flat out cannot afford that. So Yuki better
yeah.
figure this out, because if he keeps driving this hot-headedly and can't get a check on his emotions, I think no matter how outright fast he is, he's never getting promoted to Red Bull driving like that, because they don't want to deal with a driver like that alongside Max.
Nope. No, I agree. Yeah, so the race itself is kind of boring, but some interesting stories developing before our eyes kind of throughout the first few weeks of the season that we can keep an eye on going into Saudi Arabia. So speaking of Saudi Arabia, we both had Max winning it last week, and I had Perez finishing third in my podium prediction. He finished second, so it's kind of a mix up there. Um, you only had Max in your top, but this week I have Max again, shocking, and then I'm going to go Leclerc just because I feel like they're gonna oil out some of those brake issues, and he's gonna have a better car. And we saw some speed at times from Sainz and Leclerc last week, so I do think if Ferrari gets on the podium this week, I do think it's Leclerc, and then I'm just gonna go Perez just because the Red Bull's so good this year. So we think, but we probably know. So Max, Leclerc, Perez. That's my podium. What about you?
Yeah, I have the same three, just in a different order. I also have Max winning, but Perez, I think, needs to be watched this weekend. This is a race last year where Max did start with a grid penalty, but caught up to Perez, and then Perez was actually able to hold him off and win the race. So I think Perez is good at this track. He's supposedly this king of the streets, great on street circuits. I definitely expect him to consolidate second easily in this one. And then I have Leclerc on the final step of the podium. I think he bounces back. Like you said, I think Ferrari works out the brake issues, and I think he's going to be even more motivated than he was to start the season after having what could have been a podium taken away from him because of those brake issues. So give me Max Perez and Leclerc on the podium this week, and I think it's going to be a good race. I would watch the midfield, especially in this one. Saudi's produced a lot of good races so far in its short life as a circuit, so even if Max runs off down the road, I still think this is going to be an entertaining one.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm excited. Another Saturday mid morning race that we won't sleep through this time. Ain't that right? Um,
Yes.
but we're gonna do. Let's do what we did with NASCAR after the Daytona 500. We did what we called overreactions, where we just said, "This is how the season's gonna go. This is your playoffs. This is your champion." We're going to do the same thing. Obviously, there's no playoffs in F1. It's just a championship. So we have 1 through 20, our picks for the championship. And I think the best way to go through this was we each give each number. So we each go 1, 2, 3. Or would you like to start from the bottom and work our way up?
Let's start from the bottom. Let's leave suspense so
I like that.
everyone will try to guess who our champion is.
Ooh, I wonder. If one of us pick anyone other than who you think we're going to pick, quit watching and just don't listen to a single word we say because we obviously don't know what we're talking about. But if later in the year that tends
What
to
do
be
you
the
mean? Joe
thing,
Guan Yu
we're
is
still going to be
easily winning
excited.
the championship.
Okay, so let's start. Let's start at 20. I have Ocon. I don't. This team, we've talked about them, their ability to build cars. So
Or lack
I just don't
of.
see anything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm taking Kevin Magnussen for the bottom spot. I think Haas will regress as the season goes on. They usually do. And even though they started a little bit better than expected, I just don't think they're going to be able to hold on throughout the entire season as other teams maybe bring upgrades and develop. And I think Hulkenberg will be better than Magnussen over a full season. So I'm going to drop K Mag in that bottom spot.
Okay. Um, I don't know. I think he finishes a little bit ahead than last, but at 19th I have Albon for Williams. I mean, Williams, we've seen some good stuff, especially at Coda last year. We saw some good stuff from Williams racing, but I have Albon finishing 19th.
I think that's a bit low. Albon was one of the better drivers of last year, and I think he'll outperform that. In 19th, I have Valtteri Bottas. A lot of last year, he just looked despondent, like he's ready to retire, almost that Kimi Raikkonen career arc at the end where he's like, I'm just racing for fun at this point. And I don't have a lot of faith in Stake's development path either, or Sauber, or whatever. The green car, the green and black one. So give me Bottas in P19.
Okay, in my 18th place, I have a green card driver in Joe finishing 18th. I mean, for the same reasons you just said, they're going to be bottom, and I see him kind of shaping out the worst of the two drivers.
Then in my 18th spot, I have Esteban Ocon. Alpine, man, just a horrific start. They have fired everyone though, so maybe they pick up from here. And I think that it's still going to take them a while. I don't think they'll be scoring points for a while into the season. It looks really bad right now, but I think by the end of the season they'll definitely be ahead of Sauber and Haas. So Ocon in 18th, I think feels about right.
Okay, yeah. 17th, I have Sargent, another Williams driver, so I have the Williams 17th and last. Oh well, don't care, or not last, but 19th. So I think that's just how it's going to fold out for them this year. But I do think Sargent finishes ahead of Albon, so I'm going with Sargent at number 17.
I also have Sargent in P17. I have a lot of faith in James Vowles as Williams' team principal. He seems to really know what he's doing, really have a knack for leadership and building this team towards the front of the grid and the midfield. So I think Albon is still going to have the measure on Sargent this season in his second year. But I still think Logan's going to pick up more points than last year for sure, more than just that 1 point. And that'll be good enough for P17.
Yeah. I have a Haas car at 16th. I kind of figure just what the situation with Haas right now is. I just don't see it getting any better. I see it getting worse before it kind of gets terminated, honestly, and hopefully another team can come in and take um, their spot. Fingers
Andretti.
crossed with Andretti. Yeah. But I have Hulkenberg finishing 16th with Haas. I mean, I just don't think the team has it this year.
Yeah. In my P16, I'm going to take Pierre Gasly. This is, I think, Alpine's ceiling for this year. I think Gasly's once again going to have the measure on Ocon. I think he's just an outright better driver. I think they're both good drivers, though, which is why it's so sad to see Alpine this far down and completely incompetent. But I think P16 is about as far as Alpine can hope to get this year. But I do think it'll be Gasly that does it.
Yeah, no, I do have Gasly a little higher. We'll get to him, but I do think it's a little low for Gasly just because his driving ability is that good, in my opinion. Um, but we're at 15. I have Bottas for 15, my other kind of kick or saber green car guy. So don't have them shaping out too hot. But yeah, Valtteri Bottas is my 15th pick.
In 15th, I have Nico Hulkenberg, the other Haas. I think he just is able to get much more out of these Haas cars, especially in qualifying. And you never know. If he does what he did last year in Canada and sticks it up towards the front of the grid on a rainy qualifying, maybe he's able to hang on, grab some points. I think that's Haas's best shot this year. So I definitely think he's going to have a better season than Magnussen. Despite the first race, I know he ran into Stroll and kind of ruined his race at the first corner, but I think he'll get much better as the season goes on and outperform K-Mag, so I have him in my 15th spot.
Yeah, so in my 14th spot, you have Magnussen dead last in yours, and I have him 14th, finishing ahead of Hulkenberg, his Haas teammate. I mean, I don't know. Look out for Magnussen. I mean, I kind of liked what I saw a little bit from him in week one, so hopefully we see more of that. And yeah, just keep your eye for Magnussen. I don't see him finishing dead last. He's in my 14th spot.
And P14 for me is going to be Joe Guan Yu. I think that this is going to be a season where he really starts to build his career up and make a name for himself. He had some decent performances last year, but was a bit lackluster at times. I think now with Valtteri Bottas kind of just taking some time off almost at the end of his career, Joe is really going to be able to show what he can do. Put up a P11 in Bahrain, a very good performance for him, and I think he'll end up P14 by the time this season's over.
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah, I have him a little lower, but I do think his driving ability will, if he can outperform the car that he's in, then you can see him shape up higher than the bottom five. But in 13th, I have Tsunoda. We talked about him earlier, kind of having a little amateur hour or whatever. But I do have him finishing below his teammate. I just think that's how it's going to go. But I have Tsunoda 13th.
13th for me is Alex Albon, a guy you have second to last. Like I said earlier, I have a lot of faith in James Vowles, and I think Albon is going to be able to do a lot more with this car than Logan Sargent. I think Sargent might be a little bit better than he gets credit for. He's had a lot of things that are out of his control, like the steering wheel malfunction this week, but Albon also had steering wheel problems. Granted, they weren't as terminal, but still did a lot better in this race, and I think he's going to be far and away ahead of Sargent again this season and good enough for P13 easily.
Yeah, I have a Alpine car finishing 12th with Gasly. He outperforms his teammates, I think, or a teammate, and just I like his talent behind the wheel. I do think he can outperform the car just enough to kind of finish above the top 15th, and I have him 12th. So we'll see how that shakes up, but I'm pretty confident with that.
12th for me is the first of the RB cars in Yuki Tsunoda. While I do think he's faster than Daniel Ricciardo right now at this point in their careers, I just think that Ricciardo is going to be more measured over the course of a season, be more consistent, and so for that reason I have Tsunoda in P12.
Well, for those reasons you just mentioned, Ricardo, I have him my 11th spot just because I just Red Bull, not the Red Bull, but I just VCarb. I mean, they're kind of taking steps in the right direction, and we've seen that a little bit. But they kind of it's almost like they're choking themselves. So I have Ricardo finishing 2 spots ahead of his teammate, and I mean, yeah, I just think his experience and consistency will lead to that over Tsunoda.
I also have Ricardo in P11. You pretty much took the words out of my mouth there as far as consistency, and I think Ricardo knows that this is his chance to really prove he can be back alongside Max in that Red Bull seat that he left after a few years ago. So I really think this is the start of his redemption to Red Bull, and I think he's going to beat Tsunoda and end up P11.
Yeah. Well, from here on out, our top 10 look very similar. Just a lot of like, you have a guy ninth, I have a guy 10th, and we're flip flop. But this is kind of where we get into your dudes. So I have Piastri 10th. I don't think he's better than Norris. So for that reason, I have him 10th, and I just don't see him doing better than, your Strolls or Alonsos or Russells. So he's 10th in my book.
I have Lance Stroll in 10th. I think he put in a good drive at Bahrain after being backward at turn 1 to come back and pick up a point. I think he's going to need a lot more of those drives this season. I just don't think he's the same level of driver that an Alonso, and Norris, or a Piastri is, and I think those are the other three guys that he's really going to be expected to race week in and week out with how McLaren and Aston Martin compare so far to the other teams around them, but I think he's a little bit worse than the other guys he's up against, so I have Stroll P10.
Well, I have Lance Stroll P9. The weaker of the two Aston Martins, but still better than Piastri. And I think he shows splurts at certain tracks, and I think with him it's just going to be, can he be consistent at his tracks that he's normally good at enough to kind of gather the points he needs to finish top 9 or top 8 or maybe better.
In P9 for me, I have Oscar Piastri. I think this is one of the drivers with the highest ceilings in the sport right now. Still super young, has outstanding one-lap pace, and is not on the race pace of Lando Norris, but in equal cars. I don't think there are many drivers that are, honestly. I think Norris is a top 5 driver in the sport right now, but Piastri not quite there yet, but I think on track to be. And it's hard with your Norris, Alonso, Russell, Piastri, all these drivers that feel could be right together by the end of the year, but Piastri ended up on the bottom of that pile for me in P9.
Yeah, that's how I feel going to the next three that I have. I have Norris at the bottom of Alonso and Russell, Piastri's teammate. I'm not sold on McLaren this year. And Norris, one of the best drivers in the field. He's going to have a great long career ahead of him. But when it comes to the car, I'm not as confident in the McLaren as I am maybe Aston Martin's best or Mercedes. So for that reason, Norris gets my, what are we on, eighth spot?
Yeah. And P8 for me is going to be George Russell. I know he looked good the first weekend. I think over the course of a season, a guy like a Fernando Alonso, Lando Norris is going to beat him. I expect McLaren to get better over the course of the season, just like they did last year. And Mercedes this year, I think Hamilton is really going to be out, not necessarily to prove himself, but he doesn't have to race for team orders anymore. I think he'll still be helping develop the car. And also, George Russell came out and said that this car was designed more how Lewis Hamilton wanted. So I think this might be a bit of a rude awakening year for George Russell versus Hamilton. And I don't know how consistent I can expect Mercedes to be over the course of a full season. So give me Russell in P8.
Yeah, I have George Russell P7 for all those reasons, but I do think he just finished just ahead of Norris because of what I said earlier about just the car itself. Not really the driver, but I think the car is a little better. So Russell's in my P7.
In P7 for me, I have Fernando Alonso, and this is probably the hardest guy for me to place in this entire order, just because you can give Fernando Alonso a car that's the 4th best in the field, and he'll just go, okay, that's consistent podiums. He's that kind of guy, but I don't think that this Aston Martin is going to be quite good enough for him to go any higher than 7th this year, although it's so hard with him. He outperforms a car so well, so consistently that he could just end up P4 in this championship somehow, and I'd be like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But for right now, I'm going to predict him 7th.
Well, I have him predicted 6th just because I do think he can outperform the Aston Martin, but only enough to beat the Russell with Mercedes. So I have him 6th in mind.
P6 for me is going to be Lando Norris. I think like I said earlier, this is one of the best drivers in Formula One right now. I expect McLaren to make big strides over the course of this season, similarly to last year. And they've started from a better point this year than last year. They were near the back of the pack, almost doing their best Alpine impression last year in Bahrain, whereas this year they're already fighting for points, solid finishes for both drivers. But I think Norris will just be able to elevate this car and definitely take home, not quite a top 5 spot, but P6 for sure.
Well, we're into our top five now. We kind of agree a lot in our top five. I think only one difference. I have Sainz finishing fifth overall. He got the win last year. I do think he gets another win this year, and he's already starting off hot with the podium. So I have Sainz finishing fifth, below his teammate.
I also have Carlos Sainz in fifth. I think over the course of a season, Charles Leclerc is the quicker driver. I mean, last year with all the mechanical failures Leclerc had, still ended up pipping Sainz at the very end. So I think he'll be able to beat him out. But I still think Sainz is a very good driver, and P5 is
Yes.
definitely nothing to be mad at.
No. We both have Hamilton fourth. I mean, what do we need to say about that? Still with Mercedes for the final year. I don't think that'll affect really how he drives for Mercedes or how Mercedes prepares his car. I think they're trying to get the most out of him while they have him before he goes to Ferrari, but I have him fourth.
You're definitely going to want to get everything you can out of a 7-time champion while you still have him in the team. So I think Hamilton is going to have another great year, another just Lewis Hamilton type season, that deadly consistency. I think he's the second best driver in the sport right now behind Max. I think at their peaks, they're right there together, honestly, but I think Max is so on form right now, and Hamilton maybe a little bit older. Not that I think he's bad by any means. I still think he's right there, if not with Max, just right behind him, but I just don't think that Mercedes will be quite good enough to get him up into the top 3 this year, so I'm left him fourth.
Yeah, I have in third. I have Sergio Perez. I know the Red Bull's great, but I do think Leclerc just outperforms him a little bit. I think if you put him in the same car, Leclerc outperforms him anyways. But I think Leclerc with this Ferrari can find more race wins. I think Perez gets more podiums, but I think the race wins help Leclerc in the end, and he gets it done over Perez. So I have Perez third for me.
Well, even the little bit of delusional Leclerc fan I can be sometimes, I have him down in P3. I think the Red Bull looks so good this year. Ferrari's going to need to work a miracle on the development side, and with the cost cap now, it's hard to do that, especially if their concept isn't necessarily working as well as they thought it might have. So I just don't think anyone's going to be able to finish ahead of the 2 Red Bull drivers this year, and for that reason, I'm keeping Leclerc in P3.
I'm not even a Leclerc fan, and I have him in my P2. I am a Ferrari guy, though, so maybe it's my Ferrari inside going, the car's good. The car's better than you think this year. And it's already had mechanical issue in race 1, so I probably need to rethink this. But I have Leclerc P2. Hopefully I don't look like a fool coming to the end of the season.
Hopefully not. I would love it if he ended up P2. But for me, it's going to be Sergio Perez in that second spot.
Yeah.
Last year, he was much maligned all season. His form was terrible. There were talks about him losing his seat, and he still was P2 in the championship. So I think he's going to be able to get that done again this year. This Red Bull is just so good. Adrian Newey has built yet another rocket ship for Red Bull. So I think as long as he keeps doing that, you're going to see the Red Bull drivers at the top of the championship.
Yeah, and then first, we have Max Verstappen. Moving on, we've already touched on Max Verstappen. We'll have him first. There's no shot that he doesn't get into it. But just excited
Max
to see how these storylines.
I hate it when people are. Yeah, I hate it when people are saying that it's just Max is only winning because of the car. Max is just winning because Adrian Newey built the rocket ship. If Max is only winning because of the car, then why is Perez finishing down the order last year and qualifying like 12th? This is not a perfect car. It is an exceptional car. It is a great car, but Max Verstappen has proven that he is the only driver so far that's been able to drive this car at its max level consistently. So I just think you have to respect him for that. I think he is the best driver in Formula One right now, and I think he will win the championship this year. I think there's a shot he wins at least 20 races this season, which would be crazy. He's only 3 races away from beating the record he already holds of most consecutive race wins. I think he does that, so I think it's going to be a pretty easy run at the title for Max again this year.
Yeah, but just a lot of racing in this time of year. No baseball. March Madness is starting up. We'll have some more coverage starting next week on that. But yeah, one more thing before we go. In the Major League Baseball world, another Scott Boras agent signed. Matt Chapman at the Giants. 1 year guarantee was $20 million for this first year. And then it's a player option in 25 and 26, and the mutual option in 27. Um, you had mentioned, I don't know if it was on the show or off air, Chapman to the Giants, just saying they don't have a third baseman, and I talked about the Mariners, and but I think it's a good fit for the Giants, and we're seeing this with Boras agents. With Bellinger, he had to shrink his to a 3 year deal, and Chapman shrinking his to a 3 year deal. We're not seeing these big long term deals that Boras wanted, and they're starting to finally realize, like, hey, this isn't what the teams are going to give us, so we're going to have to just take what we can at this point. Spring training's been underway for a few weeks. I mean, we need to get in the field and play with a team. So they're not taking these big contracts. And I think you're going to see that with Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, and JD Martinez. I don't think any of those guys get more than a 4 year deal at this point. But I do think the Giants won this deal with the player options maybe a little heavy after 25 and 26. But no, I do think the Giants won.
Yeah, I think you started looking at this Giants order right now, and honestly, with the Young Ho Lee signing, the Jorge Soler deal, and now this is starting to look like a pretty decent lineup out there in San Francisco. So I like this deal a lot for the Giants. You get obviously elite defense at third base with Chapman as well, and a guy you can slide right into the middle of the order and feel pretty good about it. Have Jorge Soler in that cleanup spot, drop Chapman in maybe the 5 or the 6, and just say, we're going to hit a lot of bombs this year, even if we do strike out 172,000 times. So I like this signing for San Francisco a lot. As you said, the options, I think, definitely made them win this deal. And if I was a player, I don't know how much I would want to be a Scott Boras client right now with all these player options and club options that are getting thrown around. So I
agree.
think this might be the last offseason of this Scott Boras supremacy over the free agent market at this rate.
No, I agree. And we talked about this Giants team 2 years ago. Ran toe to toe with the Dodgers. So
Yeah.
they have some stuff, and they didn't really take anything away from that team. They've only really added to the team, especially this offseason heavily. So expect them to make some strides in the NL West, and we'll see. But all that's coming our way. We'll have to see how that unfolds. But that's all we got. You got anything else?
Nope, that'll be it for today.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see y'all next Tuesday. Yeah. Peace out.